the second question was, every political party is suggesting we need to borrow on the markets to pay for the crisis instead of taxing the billionaires, or should we borrow on the markets at low interest? This is the question of who's going to pay and how are they going to pay it. They're talking about the deficit now in Ireland as a result of this crisis being something like 20 billion this year, and their plan is to borrow for it. And already they're beginning to raise a problem that they're saying, well, we can borrow for now at low interest rates, and the interest rates are still low, but the debt to GNI star, which is the most accurate way of looking at Ireland's debt relative to its capacity to pay it, relative to the actual economy, not the bloated economy of the multinationals, etc., is already at about 100%. And if they start to borrow heavily, which it looks like they're going to do, well, then the question, just as it was raised during the Eurozone crisis, is going to be raised again: can Ireland really afford to pay its debt? And interest rates will begin to rise, and an increasing amount of the wealth that is produced in this country will go to pay interest to all sorts of horrific speculative bondholders, big bankers, etc. So that's and then linked to that, the government's going to say, well, we can't borrow much more, and the interest rates are going up, and now we need to have real cuts. So I think what socialists should say is we're definitely not against borrowing. Not opposed to borrowing. A state is not like a household. It's not wrong to borrow for future capital investments and so on. But we should reject, if the main thing is borrow now, well, that's just delayed pain for the working class later down the road. And instead, we should put forward an emergency program for action to show how the money exists in our society right now to pay for the crisis. I think we're going to have a new version of the 19 billion euro question that was asked non-stop at the time of the last crisis, that you have this deficit at the start of the crisis with 19 billion euros between what the state's taking in and what it's spending. And I think an important thing for the left is to be able to say, well, this is how we close it. And it's with anti-capitalist socialist measures that point towards the need for the kind of transformation that we're talking about. And some of the measures that we should be talking about there are obviously the Apple tax. That's 14.1 billion, including interest, in an escrow account currently, and the state is spending our money to fight a court case to make sure we don't get it. So they should drop the court case. They should seek to access the money. Secondly, we're already paying about 2 billion euros a year on interest on the bank bailout. We should stop paying that, and we should institute a full debt audit and repudiate odious debt that is linked to the bailout of the last bailout of the bankers. We should institute an emergency millionaires tax, an emergency tax on the net assets of millionaires exceeding 1 million euros. That's different than just a year-on-year thing, and I think it can be higher in this emergency situation, the idea of a 5% wealth tax. Similarly, we should introduce a levy on the holdings of the insurance companies. The insurance companies are currently refusing to pay out. And so there's a whole series of measures that we can point to say there's still a lot of wealth in this country, and we should go after that wealth and use it to invest in our health service right now, but also use it to avoid the major economic catastrophe that's coming, to ensure that everybody is guaranteed a decent job, to ensure that people are productively employed. The only other thing I'd say about why are people going to work if it's not for... I mean, look at the health service. If you were operating as a supposedly purely individual, rational economic actor that only does stuff for money, you would not put your life in danger every day by going to work into the health service. Instead, you would do as the right wing are pretending that there's loads of people doing. You give up your job and you get the 350 euros a week pandemic unemployment payment. People aren't doing that in the health service because they're not driven primarily by money. They have to get money, of course, because they have to live in the society. They have to feed their families. They have to access services. They have to try and fun in their lives. But they're not driven, even in capitalist society, and where people's whole psychology has been molded by this attitude of a drive for profit. Even now, people aren't primarily driven by that, and even more so in a society that is based on planning for people's needs, on unleashing people's creative potential. It will be even less so the case, and people will have a real incentive, because they own this society. They have a real ownership of society, of the economy that they're involved in, the industry that they're working in, and it makes sense for them to contribute to improve in terms of their work, but also in terms of the innovations that they'll be able to bring, and they'll be able to do so knowing that it won't be used against them by the boss to make their working life harder, to speed them up. Instead, it will be used to make their lives easier, to give them more free time, more holidays, and a less stressful work environment.